I was standing in the kitchen at 7:23 a.m. on March 15th, watching my mother frantically search through the junk drawer for birthday candles that weren't there. The irony wasn't lost on me. Today was my 28th birthday, and Mom was looking for candles for my 13-year-old cousin Lily, whose party was happening this weekend. "Maya, honey, have you seen the rainbow candles?" "The ones with the silver holders?" Mom asked, her voice already carrying that stressed-out tone she got when party planning mode kicked in. Her graying blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she still wore her faded pink robe even though Dad had already left for his morning jog. "Check the pantry, second shelf behind the cake mixes," I replied automatically, taking a sip of my coffee. The ceramic mug was warm against my palms, and I focused on that sensation instead of the familiar ache settling in my chest. The mug had been a gift from my college roommate 3 years ago. "World's best friend," printed in cheerful blue letters that had started to fade from repeated washing. "You're a lifesaver." She rushed toward the pantry, completely missing the subtle emphasis I'd put on lifesaver. Not that I expected her to catch it. I'd been Maya the lifesaver for as long as I could remember. Maya who remembered everyone's schedules. Maya who picked up emergency groceries when Dad forgot milk again. Maya who house-sat during family vacations I was somehow never invited on. Maya who had her birthday forgotten every single year for the past decade, maybe longer. The kitchen smelled like Dad's morning coffee. He always made it too strong. And the vanilla candle Mom kept burning on the counter next to her collection of ceramic roosters. Sunlight streamed through the yellow curtains she'd hung when I was in high school, casting familiar patterns across the breakfast table where I'd eaten countless bowls of cereal while listening to my family plan celebrations for everyone except me. I remembered sitting at this exact spot when I was 16, listening to them plan Jake's high school graduation party. They'd rented a tent for the backyard, hired a caterer, invited 60 people. When I graduated 2 years later with a 4.2 GPA and a full scholarship to Colorado State, we went to Applebee's, just the 4 of us. Mom had said it was more intimate that way. Found them. Mom emerged triumphant, clutching a package of rainbow spiral candles. "Lily is going to love these. Did I tell you we rented the community center? The whole East Wing. And your Aunt Sarah is making her famous chocolate fudge cake from scratch. Oh, and we hired that DJ who did the Wilsons' anniversary party last month. You remember, the one with all the lighting equipment? A DJ with lighting equipment. For a 13-year-old's birthday party." Meanwhile, last year on my birthday, I'd eaten leftover Chinese takeout alone while my family went to my brother Jake's college buddy's housewarming party. The year before that, they'd been too tired after Dad's company picnic to do anything for me. The year before that, Mom had double-booked herself with a dentist appointment. "Sounds like it'll be amazing," I managed, and I genuinely meant it. I loved Lily. She was smart and funny and kind, with Dad's green eyes and Mom's stubborn chin. She deserved every rainbow candle and DJ song and moment of celebration. My resentment wasn't toward her or any of my cousins whose birthdays got the full treatment. It was toward the pattern, the systematic way I'd been relegated to the background of my own family's attention. It hadn't always been this way. I had vague memories of birthday parties when I was very young, maybe 6 or 7, with homemade cakes and pin the tail on the donkey. But somewhere along the line, as Jake got involved in more activities, as family finances got tighter, as life got busier, my birthdays became afterthoughts. The cake turned into a grocery store cupcake, then just a, "we'll celebrate this weekend," that never came. "You'll be there, right?" Mom asked, already moving toward the coffee maker to refill her mug. Her movements were quick and efficient, the way they always were when she was in planning mode. "I put you down for bringing the ice and paper plates. Oh, and maybe some of those little plastic forks, the fancy ones with the colored handles." Of course she did. I was always assigned the practical, unglamorous items. Never the cake, never the decorations, never the special surprise that would make the birthday girl's face light up. Just ice and plates and plastic forks, the invisible foundation that kept everything running smoothly. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, though the lie tasted bitter on my tongue. The truth was messier. I probably would miss it, because by this weekend I might be somewhere else entirely, doing something I'd been planning in secret for 3 months. Something that would either heal the wound in my chest or tear it wide open. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Jenna. "Happy birthday, gorgeous. Coffee after work. I have something special for you. Can't wait to celebrate my favorite person." The message made my throat tight with unexpected emotion, At least someone remembered. Someone cared enough to plan ahead, to mark the date, to call me their favorite person. "Who's texting so early?" Mom asked, peering over my shoulder in that way she'd been doing since I was 16, and she'd caught me messaging boys she didn't approve of. "Jenna, work stuff," I lied again, quickly closing the message and sliding my phone face down on the counter. I couldn't tell her it was a birthday text, because that would require explaining that today was my birthday, and that conversation never went well. The last time I'd brought it up, 3 years ago, when I'd finally worked up the courage to ask why my birthday always seemed to get forgotten, Mom had gotten defensive and launched into a speech about how birthdays aren't that important after 21, and how I should be more mature about these things. She'd made it sound like I was being childish and selfish for wanting acknowledgement, as if wanting to feel special for one day a year was somehow unreasonable. What she didn't understand was that I wasn't asking for a pony or a surprise party at Chuck E. Cheese. I just wanted someone in my immediate family to remember the day I was born, without me having to remind them. I wanted to feel like I mattered enough to warrant a circle on the calendar, a cake from the grocery store bakery section, maybe a card with my name spelled correctly. I wanted proof that my existence had registered as something worth celebrating. "Well, tell her I said hi," Mom said, settling at the kitchen table with her coffee and her phone. Within seconds, she was scrolling through Facebook, probably looking at pictures from other people's family celebrations. Her thumb moved in practiced swipes, pausing occasionally to like a photo or leave a heart emoji comment. I finished my coffee in silence, watching her scroll past what I knew would be several "Happy Birthday, Maya" posts from high school friends, college roommates, and work acquaintances. The algorithm wouldn't remind her because she'd never marked my birthday as an important date worth remembering. In all the years Facebook had been sending birthday notifications, she'd never once gotten one for me. Meanwhile, she had elaborate calendar reminders set up for everyone else. Jake's birthday was marked 6 weeks in advance with notes about gift ideas and party planning. Dad's birthday had shopping lists and restaurant reservations. Even our dog Buster's Gotcha Day was commemorated with special treats and new toys. But March 15th, just another Thursday. Just another day when Maya would quietly turn a year older while the world spun on, oblivious. At 8:15, I grabbed my purse, a practical black leather bag I'd bought myself for Christmas 2 years ago, and headed toward the door. The house felt like a museum sometimes, full of memories from a life where I'd always been present, but somehow never central. Family photos lined the hallway, vacations to Yellowstone and the Grand Canyon, graduations and award ceremonies, Christmas mornings and Easter brunches, and I was in most of them, standing slightly to the side, smiling, but not quite the focus. There was one photo that always caught my attention, from my 21st birthday. We'd gone to dinner at a nice steakhouse downtown, just the 4 of us. In the picture, I'm smiling and holding up a glass of wine, my first legal drink, but my parents are looking at Jake, who's telling some animated story with his hands, even on my birthday, in a photo supposedly commemorating my milestone. I'm not the center of attention. "Have a good day, sweetie," Mom called without looking up from her phone. I paused at the front door, one hand on the brass doorknob that Dad had installed when I was 12 after the old one kept sticking. The weight of the door, the familiar creak of the hinges, the way the morning light hit the frosted glass panel, everything about this house was known to me, comfortable and suffocating in equal measure. This was the house where I'd spent my entire childhood and most of my 20s, moving back after college when my entry-level marketing job barely covered rent in Denver's competitive housing market. It was supposed to be temporary, just until I got on my feet financially. That was 6 years ago. The drive to work took 23 minutes through Denver's morning traffic, past the coffee shop where Jenna and I met for weekend brunches, past the gym I'd joined and abandoned 3 times, past the apartment complex where I'd lived briefly after graduation before reality set in. I spent every minute of that drive thinking about the plan I'd been developing since Christmas, when I'd sat around the tree watching everyone else open carefully chosen gifts, while I received a generic gift card to Target and a book Mom had clearly grabbed from the discount table at Barnes & Noble. 3 months of research, phone calls made during lunch breaks, and careful savings from a budget that was already tight. 3 months of preparing for the possibility that this birthday would be like all the others, forgotten, overlooked, treated as just another Thursday in March. But this year felt different. This year, the quiet disappointment had crystallized into something sharper, more focused. This year, I decided that if my family couldn't remember I existed, maybe it was time to show them what my absence would look like. My office building was a sleek glass structure downtown, all modern lines and reflective surfaces that caught the morning sun. Riding the elevator to the 15th floor gave me the same sense of ascending away from my problems that it always did. The elevator music was instrumental jazz, the kind of smooth, forgettable soundtrack to corporate life. Here, I was Maya Henderson, marketing coordinator, the person who organized successful campaigns and remembered everyone's project deadlines. Here, people knew my value. "Morning, Maya," called Sandra from reception as I walked past her semicircular desk with its carefully arranged flowers and company brochures. Sandra was in her 50s with short silver hair and reading glasses that hung from a beaded chain. She'd been with the company for 15 years and knew everyone's coffee order, favorite lunch spot, and birthday. "Got your calendar cleared for the Morrison presentation this afternoon?" "All set," I replied, grateful for the distraction of work responsibilities. "The slides are finalized. I've confirmed the conference room, and I ordered lunch from that sandwich place Mr. Morrison likes." This was my element, being prepared, being reliable, being the person others could count on to handle the details that made everything run smoothly. The skills that made me invisible at home made me indispensable at work. And there was something bittersweet about that realization. "You're an absolute treasure," Sandra said warmly. "I don't know what this place would do without you." The compliment settled into the hollow space in my chest, like a small, warm light. At least here, my efforts were seen and appreciated. At least here, people noticed when I went above and beyond. I settled at my desk in the marketing department's open floor plan, surrounded by the familiar chaos of creative work. My workspace was an island of organization amid the controlled chaos. Supplies sorted in clear containers, files labeled and color-coded, a small succulent plant that had somehow survived 3 years of my intermittent care. My dual monitors displayed my meticulously maintained calendar, where every meeting, deadline, and project milestone was tracked with military precision. Everything in its place, every deadline noted, every detail managed. If only my personal life could be organized as efficiently as my work projects. My computer chimed with a reminder: "Submit quarterly budget report, due today." I'd finished it yesterday, of course, staying late to perfect the formatting and double-check every number. But I'd set the reminder anyway, because I'd learned not to trust that important things would simply be remembered. As I opened my email, I found 17 birthday messages waiting for me. Colleagues who'd gotten the automatic calendar notification, friends from college who still kept in touch through social media, my yoga instructor whose studio sent personal birthday greetings to all their members, even my dentist's office with their cheerful automated message. Everyone except the people who'd been there the day I was born. The irony was overwhelming. Strangers and acquaintances remembered me, celebrated me, took the time to send kind words. But my own parents, the people who'd supposedly loved me unconditionally for 28 years, couldn't be bothered to mark the date on their calendars. I scrolled through the messages, feeling simultaneously grateful and heartbroken. My coworker Tim had sent a gif of dancing pandas. My college friend Rebecca had written a long message about how much our friendship meant to her. Even the barista at my local Starbucks had somehow remembered and sent a message through Instagram. But nothing from Mom, nothing from Dad, nothing from Jake. Radio silence from the people whose acknowledgement mattered most. The plan I'd been developing suddenly felt less like an overreaction and more like a necessity. Sometimes you have to create your own moments of recognition, your own celebrations, your own sense of worth. Sometimes you have to save yourself because no one else will. I pulled up a new browser tab and navigated to the website I'd bookmarked 3 months ago. The confirmation email was still in my saved drafts folder, waiting for my final decision. One click of send, and everything would change. One click, and I'd stop waiting for my family to remember I existed. But first, I had a presentation to deliver, and a birthday to get through. Just like every year, I'd smile, be helpful, and pretend it didn't hurt. The difference was that this year, I had an exit strategy. This year, I had a plan that would force them to notice me, one way or another. The Morrison presentation went flawlessly, which should have made me feel accomplished. Instead, I sat in the empty conference room afterward, staring at the congratulatory email from my boss, while the weight of another successful but unacknowledged achievement settled on my shoulders. Excellent work, as always, Maya. You really know how to make our clients feel valued. Valued. The irony wasn't lost on me. It was 3:47 p.m. when I finally opened the draft email I'd been avoiding all day. The cursor blinked in the subject line, "Reservation confirmation request." 3 months of research had led me to this moment. 3 months of secretly planning what would either be the most liberating or most devastating decision of my life. The email was addressed to Serenity Springs Resort in Sedona, Arizona, a place I'd discovered during one of my late-night internet rabbit holes about solo travel destinations. Their website promised transformative experiences for the soul-weary traveler, and a chance to rediscover your authentic self away from life's distractions. It sounded exactly like what I needed, even if I couldn't quite articulate why. My finger hovered over the send button. Once I confirmed this reservation, there would be no turning back. Once I clicked send, I'd be committed to disappearing from my own life for 10 days, starting this weekend. The same weekend as Lily's birthday party, which my family was counting on me to help with. But that was exactly the point. Maya? I looked up to find my colleague Tim standing in the conference room doorway. He was holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the concerned expression he got when he thought someone needed rescuing from their own thoughts. "Thought you might need caffeine after that presentation," he said, sliding one of the cups across the polished table toward me. "You looked like you were carrying the weight of the world in there." Tim was one of those rare co-workers who actually paid attention to people beyond their productivity metrics. He was 32, recently divorced, and had the kind of quiet empathy that came from his own experience with disappointment. We'd bonded over late-night project deadlines and shared stories about complicated family dynamics. "Thanks," I said, gratefully accepting the coffee. It was from the good place downstairs, not the break room swill. "Just thinking. Dangerous activity," he said with a small smile, settling into the chair across from me. "Want to talk about it?" I studied his face, wondering if I could trust him with the truth. Tim knew about my family situation. I'd mentioned it during one of our post-deadline dinner conversations, but I'd never fully articulated how deep the neglect ran. "It's my birthday today," I said finally, the words feeling strange and vulnerable in the sterile conference room air. His expression shifted immediately. "Maya, that's wonderful. Happy birthday." Then he paused, clearly reading something in my face. "But you don't look like someone who's celebrating." My family forgot. Again, the admission came out smaller than I intended. "They're too busy planning my 13-year-old cousin's party this weekend, complete with DJ and rented venue." Tim's face darkened. He seemed to be searching for words that weren't too harsh. "How long has this been going on?" "Years. A decade. Maybe more." I took a sip of coffee, grateful for something to do with my hands. "I've become the invisible daughter, the reliable one who shows up with ice and paper plates but never gets her own cake." "That's not right, Maya. Family should..." "Should what?" I interrupted, surprised by the bitterness in my own voice. "Should remember their daughter exists. Should acknowledge that she has feelings. Should treat her birthday with even a fraction of the attention they give to everyone else's." The words hung between us, raw and painful. I'd never said it all out loud before, never let myself fully articulate the depth of the hurt. Hearing it spoken made it real in a way that private thoughts couldn't. "What are you going to do about it?" Tim asked quietly. I turned my laptop screen toward him, showing him the email draft. "I'm thinking about disappearing for a while. 10 days in Arizona, alone." He read the email, his eyebrows rising slightly. "During your cousin's party, during her party, during the weekend they're expecting me to help set up chairs and serve cake and pretend I'm happy to be the invisible helper again." Tim leaned back in his chair, considering. "That's bold. Or selfish," I said, voicing the fear that had been nagging at me all day. "No," he said firmly. "Taking care of yourself isn't selfish. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. Your family has had 28 years to figure out how to treat you with basic respect and consideration. If they can't manage that, maybe it's time they experienced the consequences." His words hit me like validation I didn't know I needed. Someone else could see it. Someone else understood that this wasn't about being dramatic or attention-seeking. This was about survival. "But what if I'm wrong?" I asked. "What if they do care, and they're just forgetful?" "Maya," Tim said gently, "forgetting once is human. Forgetting consistently for years while meticulously planning celebrations for everyone else. That's a choice." The truth of that statement settled into my bones like ice water. It was a choice. Every time they remembered Jake's birthday weeks in advance, every time they threw elaborate parties for extended family, every time they marked every special occasion except mine, it was a choice. I clicked send before I could lose my nerve. The confirmation appeared immediately. "Thank you for choosing Serenity Springs Resort. Your reservation for March 18th, 28 has been confirmed. We look forward to welcoming you to your transformation journey. There, I said, my voice slightly shaky. It's done. Tim reached across the table and squeezed my hand briefly. Good for you. And happy birthday, Maya. You deserve so much better than what you've been getting. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of normal work activities that felt surreal against the backdrop of what I'd just done. I organized files, answered emails, and participated in a brainstorming session for next month's campaign, all while carrying the secret of my impending disappearance like a hidden flame in my chest. At 5:30, I met Jenna at our usual coffee shop, a cozy place called Grind Coffee that smelled like cinnamon and fresh pastries. She was already waiting at our favorite corner table, a small wrapped package beside her laptop. "There's the birthday girl," she said, jumping up to give me a fierce hug that smelled like her signature vanilla perfume. I've been excited about this all day. Jenna was everything I wished I could be. Confident, spontaneous, unapologetically herself. She worked as a freelance graphic designer, traveled whenever she felt like it, and had the kind of relationship with her parents where they actually enjoyed each other's company. Sometimes I wondered if she could teach me how to live like that. "You didn't have to get me anything," I said, though I was genuinely touched by the effort she'd made. "Of course I did. You're my best friend, and it's your birthday. That's how this works." She pushed the package toward me. "Open it." Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal with my initials embossed on the cover in gold lettering. The pages were thick and cream-colored, the kind that would make even grocery lists feel important. "It's gorgeous," I said, running my fingers over the smooth leather. "I thought you might want to start writing down your thoughts," Jenna said. "You've got so much going on in that head of yours, and sometimes getting it out on paper helps you see things more clearly." She had no idea how perfectly timed this gift was. "There's something else," she continued, pulling out her phone. "I made us dinner reservations at that Italian place you love." My treat. The kindness was almost overwhelming. Here was someone who remembered not just my birthday, but my favorite restaurant. Someone who took the time to plan something special just for me. "Jenna?" I started, then stopped, unsure how to tell her what I'd done. "What is it?" "I'm leaving town this weekend, for 10 days. Her eyes lit up. "That's amazing. Where are you going? Wait, is this about a guy? Please tell me you finally decided to take that risk with—" "No," I interrupted. "It's not about a guy. It's about my family." I told her everything. About the forgotten birthdays, about Lily's elaborate party, about the years of feeling invisible in my own home. I told her about the email I'd sent, about the reservation in Arizona, about the decision to simply disappear without explanation. Jenna listened without interrupting, her expression growing more concerned as the story unfolded. "So you're just not going to tell them you're leaving?" she asked when I finished. "That's the point. I want them to notice I'm gone. I want them to realize what it feels like when someone important to you just isn't there anymore. But Maya, what if something happens? What if there's an emergency? Then they'll figure it out, the same way I've had to figure out how to handle disappointment and neglect for years." Jenna reached across the table and took my hands. "I understand why you're doing this. I really do. But I'm worried about you. 10 days alone in Arizona, when you're this hurt. Are you sure it's the right time?" "It's exactly the right time," I said. "I need space to think, to figure out what I want my life to look like. I need to be somewhere where I matter to myself, even if I don't matter to them." She squeezed my hands. "You matter to me. You know that, right?" "I know, and that means everything to me. But I need more than one person in my life who thinks I'm worth remembering." We went to dinner as planned, and Jenna did her best to make it celebratory, despite my obvious emotional turmoil. She ordered wine, insisted we get dessert, and regaled me with stories from her latest client project. But I could see the worry in her eyes, the way she kept studying my face, as if she were trying to memorize it. When she dropped me off at home, she made me promise to text her every day while I was gone. "I'm proud of you for doing something for yourself," she said. "I just want you to be safe." "I will be," I assured her, though I wasn't entirely sure what safety would look like for me anymore. The house was quiet when I walked in. Mom and Dad were watching television in the living room, their voices a low murmur of commentary about whatever show they'd chosen. I could hear Mom laughing at something Dad said, the comfortable sound of a couple who'd been together for 30 years. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to their easy contentment, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Tomorrow was Friday, and they'd spend the weekend preparing for Lily's party. They'd assign me tasks, expect me to show up with supplies, assume I'd help clean up afterward. They'd take my presents for granted the same way they'd taken my birthdays for granted, but I wouldn't be there. In my room, I pulled out the journal Jenna had given me and wrote my first entry. March 15th, my 28th birthday. Today, my family forgot my birthday again, but for the first time, I decided to do something about it. I booked a solo trip to Arizona. I'm leaving tomorrow night, and I'm not telling anyone where I'm going. I don't know if this makes me brave or cruel, maybe both. All I know is that I can't keep being the invisible daughter, the reliable helper who never gets helped in return. I deserve more than being an afterthought in my own family. 10 days from now, I'll either have found a way to make peace with this situation, or I'll have found the courage to change it entirely. I closed the journal and began packing my suitcase, each folded item feeling like a small act of rebellion. Tomorrow, I would go to work and act normal. Tomorrow night, I would drive to the airport while my family planned another celebration I wasn't truly invited to. For the first time in years, I was choosing myself. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp March air that promised spring, but delivered winter's final reminder. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., 2 hours before my alarm, with the strange mixture of excitement and terror that comes with crossing a point of no return. My suitcase sat packed and ready by my bedroom door, filled with clothes I'd chosen carefully for a trip I'd never taken before. Hiking boots I'd bought online but never worn. Sundresses that had hung in my closet waiting for occasions that never came. A new swimsuit still with tags attached. Purchased 3 months ago when I'd first started planning this escape. Downstairs, the house hummed with its usual morning routine. Dad's coffee brewing, Mom's shower running, the familiar sounds of a family starting another day without acknowledging that their daughter was about to vanish from their lives. I made myself toast and ate it standing at the kitchen counter, watching the sunrise paint the sky pale pink through the window. In 12 hours, I'd be on a plane to Phoenix. In 13 hours, I'd be driving a rental car through desert landscape I'd only seen in movies. In 14 hours, I'd be checking into a resort where no one knew my name or my history of being forgotten. "Morning, sweetie," Mom said, appearing in the kitchen with her hair still damp from the shower. She was already dressed in her getting things done outfit, practical jeans and a sweater that could handle party preparation activities. "Morning," I replied, rinsing my plate in the sink with movements that felt oddly ceremonial. This was possibly the last conversation I'd have with her for 10 days, and she had no idea. "I'm going to the party supply store this morning," she said, pouring her coffee into the travel mug I'd given her 3 Christmases ago. "Want to come with me? We could grab lunch afterward." The invitation hung in the air between us, genuine and casual, the kind of mother-daughter outing I'd longed for as a teenager. The timing felt like cosmic irony. The day before I disappeared, she was finally offering me her time and attention. "I can't," I said, and the words felt like stepping off a cliff. "I have meetings all day." It wasn't entirely a lie. I did have meetings, but I'd also arranged to leave work early to catch my flight. I'd submitted my vacation request weeks ago, citing personal time, without elaborating. My boss had approved it without question. I never took time off, so he assumed I must need it. "Oh well," Mom said, checking her phone for the time. "Maybe next week. Actually, remind me to ask you about helping with the centerpieces on Sunday morning. Sarah's running behind with the decorations." She was already assuming I'd be available, already assigning me tasks for a party I wouldn't attend. The casual presumption of my availability, my willingness to drop everything and help, struck me like a physical blow. "I might be busy Sunday," I said carefully. "Doing what?" She looked genuinely puzzled, as if the concept of me having plans that didn't revolve around family obligations was foreign to her. "Just personal stuff." She shrugged and grabbed her purse from the counter. "Well, try to keep Sunday afternoon free if you can. These parties don't organize themselves." She left without saying goodbye, already on her phone making the first of what would be dozens of calls about cake flavors and balloon arrangements and playlist selections, planning a celebration with the kind of attention to detail she'd never applied to my birthdays. After she left, I sat in the quiet kitchen and called in sick to work. Another lie, but a necessary one. I needed the day to prepare mentally for what I was about to do, to sit with my decision and make sure I could live with the consequences. The day stretched ahead of me like a blank canvas. No meetings to run, no deadlines to meet, no family obligations to fulfill, just me and the weight of my impending disappearance. I decided to spend the morning doing things I loved but rarely had time for. I walked to the local farmer's market, buying fresh flowers and artisan bread from vendors who smiled and made small talk about the weather. I stopped at the bookstore and browsed the travel section, reading about Arizona's desert landscapes and Native American history. I bought a guide to desert hiking and a book about solo female travelers, adding them to my suitcase like talismans. At lunch, I treated myself to a nice meal at a restaurant downtown, sitting at a table for one without feeling self-conscious. The server, a woman about my age with kind eyes, brought me a small slice of chocolate cake, on the house, when I mentioned it was a celebration day. "What are you celebrating?" she asked. "My independence," I said, surprising myself with the honesty. She grinned. "Those are the best kinds of celebrations." The afternoon passed quietly. I cleaned my room, leaving it neat and organized in case anyone came looking for me. I wrote a simple note and left it on my dresser. "Gone for a few days to think. Don't worry about me. I'll be in touch when I'm ready." It felt simultaneously too much and not enough explanation for what I was doing. I called Jenna to confirm she had my flight information and hotel details, just in case of emergency. "You sure about this?" she asked for the 100th time. "I've never been sure about anything in my life," I told her. "But I need to do this. I need to know what it feels like to choose myself for once." At 4 p.m., I dragged my suitcase downstairs and loaded it into my car. The house felt different somehow, like I was seeing it through a lens of finality. The family photos on the hallway wall, the comfortable furniture I'd grown up with, the kitchen where I'd eaten thousands of meals. Everything looked the same but felt like it belonged to someone else's life. I left my house key on the kitchen counter, next to a list of emergency contacts Mom kept magneted to the refrigerator. My name was on that list, with my cell phone number and, in case of emergency, call Maya, written in Mom's careful handwriting. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was the emergency contact for everyone else, but no one served that role for me. The drive to Denver International Airport took 45 minutes through afternoon traffic. I'd made this drive hundreds of times to pick up visiting relatives or drop off friends, but never for my own trip, never for my own adventure. Check-in was surprisingly smooth. I'd been worried that traveling alone would mark me as suspicious somehow, that airline staff would question why a single woman was flying to Arizona with no return date planned. But the gate agent simply smiled, handed me my boarding pass, and wished me a pleasant flight. Security took longer. I stood in line behind families heading to Disney World, business travelers with expensive luggage, couples planning romantic getaways. Everyone seemed to have a story, a reason, a destination that made sense. I felt like an imposter among legitimate travelers. But when I finally reached my gate, something shifted. I was really doing this. Despite years of being overlooked and undervalued, despite the guilt gnawing at my stomach, despite not knowing what I'd find in Arizona or what I'd find in myself, I was actually following through. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Hey sis, Mom said you might help with setup tomorrow morning. Can you grab tablecloths from the party store?" The casual assumption that I'd be available, that I'd drop everything to help with yet another celebration I wasn't truly invited to, crystallized every feeling that had led me to this airport gate. I turned off my phone without responding. The flight to Phoenix was smooth and surprisingly peaceful. I had a window seat, and as Denver's lights faded below us, I felt something release in my chest that I hadn't even realized I'd been holding. The physical distance from my problems felt like emotional distance too, like I was literally rising above the patterns that had trapped me for so long. I pulled out the journal Jenna had given me and wrote, March 16th, 35,000 feet above somewhere I'm on a plane to Arizona, and my family doesn't know where I am. For the first time in my adult life, no one can find me, call me, or assign me a task. I should feel guilty, but instead I feel free. I don't know what I'm hoping to find in the desert. Maybe just proof that I can exist without being needed by everyone else. Maybe space to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to earn love through helpfulness. The woman sitting next to me is reading a romance novel and drinking wine. She looks completely comfortable with her own company. I want to learn how to be like that. The woman next to me, as if sensing my thoughts, looked over and smiled. She was probably in her 50s, with silver hair and laugh lines that spoke of a life well lived. "First time in Arizona?" she asked. "First time traveling alone anywhere, actually." Her smile widened. "How exciting. I'm Janet. I do this trip 3 times a year. My daughter lives in Scottsdale. But I also just love the desert. There's something about all that space and silence that puts life in perspective." We talked for the rest of the flight about travel, about family, about the courage it takes to step outside your comfort zone. Janet told me about her divorce 20 years ago, how she'd discovered solo travel as a way to reconnect with herself after decades of defining herself through other people's needs. "The desert will teach you things about yourself you didn't know you needed to learn," she said as we began our descent into Phoenix. "And just stay open to whatever comes up." Sky Harbor Airport was bustling with Friday night travelers, but I felt calm as I collected my luggage and headed to the rental car counter. The woman behind the counter upgraded me to a red SUV at no extra charge and gave me detailed directions to Sedona, along with recommendations for hiking trails and restaurants. "You picked a perfect time to visit," she said. "March is our sweet spot. Warm days, cool nights, not too crowded yet. You're going to love it." The drive from Phoenix to Sedona took 2 hours through landscape that gradually shifted from urban sprawl to desert, to the otherworldly red rock formations I'd seen in photographs but never believed could be real. The rocks glowed in my headlights like ancient sentinels, massive and eternal and completely indifferent to human drama. I arrived at Serenity Springs Resort just before midnight, exhausted but strangely exhilarated. The lobby was all warm wood and soft lighting, with floor-to-ceiling windows that would showcase stunning views in daylight. The night clerk was a young man with a friendly smile who checked me in quickly and efficiently. "Welcome to Sedona, Ms. Henderson. You're in the Juniper Suite, one of our favorites for solo travelers. Great views, private patio, very peaceful. Is this your first visit to our area?" "Yes, it is." "Well, you've come to the right place for whatever you're looking for. Sedona has a way of helping people find what they need. The concierge desk has information about hiking trails, meditation sessions, spa services, whatever speaks to you." My suite was perfect, spacious but cozy, decorated in earth tones that echoed the desert landscape visible through large windows. The bed was covered in soft linens that looked like clouds, and a small refrigerator was stocked with healthy snacks and sparkling water. But the best feature was the private patio, where I could sit under more stars than I'd ever seen in Denver's light-polluted sky. The silence was complete, except for the distant sound of wind through rock formations. I sat outside for a long time, wrapped in a blanket from the bedroom, trying to process what I'd done. Somewhere in Colorado, my family was probably asleep, unaware that I'd vanished from their lives. Tomorrow morning, they'd expect me to show up with tablecloths and helpful enthusiasm. Instead, they'd find an empty house and a note that would force them to confront my absence for the first time in years. I felt guilty, and liberated in equal measure. Guilty for abandoning them during Lily's celebration. Liberated from the exhausting cycle of giving without receiving. Guilty for not explaining myself better. Liberated from having to justify my need for recognition and respect. My phone, which I'd turned back on after landing, showed 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. They'd found my note, but I wasn't ready to deal with their reaction yet. I wasn't ready to be pulled back into patterns of explaining and apologizing and minimizing my own feelings to make everyone else comfortable. I turned the phone off again and went inside to sleep in a bed that was mine alone, in a place where no one knew my history of being forgotten. For the first time in years, I fell asleep without worrying about anyone else's needs or expectations. I fell asleep planning to wake up and spend the day doing exactly what I wanted to do, when I wanted to do it. I fell asleep belonging only to myself. I woke up at sunrise on Saturday morning, not from an alarm but from the incredible light streaming through my suite's windows. The red rocks of Sedona glowed like they were lit from within, painting everything in shades of gold and crimson I'd never seen before. It was the kind of natural beauty that made you understand why people talked about spiritual experiences in places like this. For the first time in months, maybe years, I woke up without immediately thinking about what other people needed from me. No mental checklist of family obligations. No anxiety about forgotten tasks or disappointed expectations. Just me, this incredible view, and a day that belonged entirely to my own choices. I made coffee with the fancy machine in my suite's kitchenette and sat on my private patio, wrapped in the plush robe the resort provided. The morning air was cool and clean, carrying scents I couldn't identify. Desert sage, maybe, or juniper. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional call of a bird I didn't recognize. My phone sat on the bedside table, still turned off. Like a sleeping dragon, I wasn't ready to wake. I knew there would be more messages, more missed calls, probably increasingly frantic attempts to reach me. But for now, I was content to exist in this pocket of peace where no one could find me, or assign me tasks or make me feel guilty for taking up space. Around 9 a.m., I got dressed in hiking clothes and drove to a trailhead the concierge had recommended, Bell Rock, one of Sedona's famous energy vortexes. I wasn't sure I believed in energy vortexes, but I believed in the power of moving my body through beautiful landscapes, of challenging myself physically while working through emotional complexity. The parking area was busy with other hikers, families with children, couples taking selfies against the dramatic backdrop of red rock spires. I felt self-conscious at first, being alone among all these groups, but once I started walking, the feeling dissolved into something like pride. I was doing this. I was hiking alone in Arizona, taking care of myself, creating my own adventure. The trail was moderately challenging, winding upward through scrubby desert vegetation toward the base of Bell Rock's distinctive formation. Other hikers nodded and smiled as we passed each other, the kind of easy camaraderie that comes from shared appreciation for natural beauty. About halfway up, I stopped to rest on a flat rock and drink some water. That's when I met Elena, a woman about my age who was sitting nearby, sketching the landscape in a small notebook. "First time in Sedona?" she asked, looking up from her drawing. "Is it that obvious?" She laughed. You have that slightly overwhelmed but amazed expression that everyone gets when they see this place for the first time. I'm Elena, by the way. I live in Flagstaff, but I come here whenever life gets too complicated. Maya. And yes, life definitely feels complicated right now." Elena closed her sketchbook and gestured for me to sit beside her on the rock. She had dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, paint-stained fingers that spoke of an artistic life, and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she didn't waste time on small talk. "Running away from something or running towards something?" she asked. "Both, I think." I found myself telling her the whole story, the forgotten birthdays, the invisible daughter syndrome, the family who expected my labor but never celebrated my existence. Elena listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding in recognition. "I did something similar about 5 years ago," she said when I finished. "Not a family situation, but a job where I was completely taken for granted. Worked 60-hour weeks, solved everyone's problems, never got credit or recognition. One day I just stopped, gave my notice, moved to Arizona, started over as a freelance artist. Do you regret it? Best decision I ever made. But it was terrifying at the time. Felt like I was being selfish, abandoning people who needed me." She picked up a small red stone and turned it over in her hands. "What I realized is that people who truly care about you don't want you to sacrifice your happiness for their convenience. And people who do want that, well, maybe they're not as important to your life as you thought." We hiked together for the rest of the morning, talking about family dynamics, self-worth, and the courage it takes to change patterns that have defined your whole life. Elena had a way of asking questions that made me think deeper about my motivations and fears. "What's the best-case scenario if you go home and nothing changes?" she asked as we descended the trail. "I guess I continue being helpful and reliable and eventually accepted that being forgotten is just part of who I am in my family. And the worst-case scenario if you demand to be treated better?" I thought about it for a long time. They get angry. They tell me I'm being dramatic or selfish. They make me feel guilty for wanting basic recognition and respect. So the worst case is that they reveal who they really are, and you have to decide whether you want people like that in your life. The clarity of that perspective hit me like a physical force. I'd been so afraid of conflict, so desperate to maintain connection even when that connection was one-sided and painful, that I'd never considered the possibility that conflict might be necessary for authentic relationship. After the hike, Elena and I had lunch at a cafe in Sedona's main tourist area. She insisted on buying, saying it was her way of supporting someone else's journey toward self-advocacy. "I have a feeling your family is going to be very surprised by the person who comes home from this trip," she said, as we parted ways. That afternoon, I treated myself to a spa session at the resort, something I'd never done before. The massage therapist, a woman named Maria with incredibly strong hands, worked out knots in my shoulders I didn't even know were there. "You carry a lot of tension here," she said, kneading a particularly tight spot between my shoulder blades. "It feels like the weight of the world, more like the weight of other people's expectations," I said. "Ah, yes, I see that a lot. People who take care of everyone except themselves." She worked silently for a few minutes, then added, "The beautiful thing about bodies is they tell the truth. They hold stress in places that match emotional patterns. Your shoulders say you've been carrying burdens that don't belong to you." After the massage, I sat by the resort's pool, still feeling loose and relaxed in a way I couldn't remember experiencing before. I pulled out my journal and wrote, March 17th, Day 2. In Sedona. I hiked Bell Rock this morning and met Elena, who made me realize that I've been so afraid of conflict that I've accepted mistreatment as normal. I've been carrying everyone else's emotional weight in my shoulders. Literally. For the first time in my adult life, I spent an entire day focused solely on what I wanted to do. I chose where to go, what to eat, who to talk to, how to spend my time. It sounds simple, but it feels revolutionary. I still haven't turned my phone on. I know I'll have to eventually, but not yet. Not until I'm stronger. Not until I remember who I am when I'm not trying to earn love through usefulness. That evening, I had dinner alone at the resort's restaurant, sitting at a table by the window where I could watch the sunset, paint the red rocks in impossible shades of orange and purple. The server, a young man named David, made excellent wine recommendations and didn't seem to find it strange that I was dining alone. Business trip or pleasure? He asked as he brought my appetizer. Soul-searching trip, I said. He grinned. Those are the best kind. Sedona's good for that. Something about the landscape makes it hard to lie to yourself. After dinner, I sat on my patio under a canopy of stars more brilliant than anything I'd ever seen in Denver. The desert night was alive with sounds. Owls calling, coyotes howling in the distance, the whisper of wind through ancient rock formations. I thought about Lily's party, which was probably happening right now. I imagined my family setting up tables and decorating the community center, wondering where I was but working around my absence the way they'd worked around my presence for years. I felt a pang of guilt, but it was smaller than I'd expected, overshadowed by something that felt like relief. For once, they would have to notice I wasn't there. For once, my absence would create an inconvenience they couldn't ignore. Around 10 p.m., I finally turned on my phone. The notification screen was overwhelming. 87 text messages, 43 missed calls, 15 voicemails. My heart hammered as I scrolled through them, watching the progression from confusion to worry, to anger, to what looked like genuine panic. Mom, 8:47 a.m. Where are you? Jake needs those tablecloths. Mom, 9:15 a.m. Maya, this isn't funny. Call me back. Dad, 10:22 a.m. Your mother is worried sick. Where did you go? Jake, 11:34 a.m. Seriously, where are you? We need help setting up. Then the tone shifted as hours passed without response. Mom, 2:18 p.m. I found your note. What do you mean you're gone for a few days? Gone where? Dad, 3:45 p.m. Maya, if you're trying to make some kind of point, this isn't the way to do it. Jake, 4:12 p.m. Mom's crying. I hope you're happy. And then, later in the evening, something different. Mom, 7:33 p.m. I keep thinking about your birthday. Did we forget again? Is that what this is about? Dad, 8:52 p.m. We're not mad, sweetheart. We're just worried. Please call and let us know you're safe. Jake, 9:27 p.m. Lily asked where you were. I didn't know what to tell her. The party wasn't the same without you. The progression of messages told a story I'd never seen before. First, they'd treated my absence as an inconvenience to be managed. Then, as hours passed without contact, inconvenience had shifted to concern. Finally, someone, probably Mom, had connected my disappearance to my birthday, and the tone had changed entirely. They were worried. Actually, genuinely worried about me, in a way I'd never experienced from them before. The realization was both validating and heartbreaking. It had taken disappearing completely for them to notice I existed at all. I scrolled through the voicemails, listening to the progression from irritated to panicked. Mom's voice breaking as she asked if she'd forgotten my birthday again. Dad's awkward attempt to express concern he probably didn't know how to articulate. Jake's admission that the party felt wrong without me there. For the first time in my adult life, they were experiencing my absence as a loss rather than simply working around it. I started typing and deleting responses, trying to find words that expressed how I felt without immediately falling back into the pattern of reassuring them and minimizing my own needs. Finally, I sent a simple text to the family group chat. I'm safe. I'm in Arizona. I need some time to think, and I'll be home in a week. I'm not trying to punish anyone. I'm trying to figure out how to exist in this family in a way that doesn't make me feel invisible. The responses came immediately. Mom, Arizona, why didn't you tell us you were traveling? Jake, What do you mean invisible? We love you. Dad, when are you coming home? Your mother is beside herself. But I turned the phone off again before I could get drawn into explanations and justifications. I wasn't ready to manage their feelings about my absence. For once, they could sit with the discomfort of not knowing where I was or how I was doing. For once, they could experience what it felt like to worry about someone who seemed to have vanished from their lives. I fell asleep that night, feeling something I'd rarely experienced in relationship to my family. Powerful. Not powerful in a vindictive way, but powerful in the sense that I'd finally taken action to change a dynamic that had been suffocating me for years. Tomorrow, I'd continue exploring this beautiful alien landscape. I'd continue learning how to be alone without being lonely, how to take up space without apologizing for it. But tonight, I fell asleep knowing that for the first time in my adult life, my family was going to bed thinking about me, missing me, wondering what they'd done to drive me away. It felt like the beginning of everything changing. The remaining days in Sedona passed like a meditation retreat for the soul. Each morning, I woke up without the familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach, without the immediate mental inventory of what everyone else needed from me that day. Instead, I woke up to Red Rock views and the novel question, what do I want to do today? I hiked Cathedral Rock and Devil's Bridge, each trail teaching me something new about my own strength and endurance. I took a pottery class in town, laughing at my lopsided bowl while discovering I had hands that could create things, not just organize other people's lives. I attended a meditation session at the resort, sitting in silence with strangers who were also seeking something they couldn't quite name. Most importantly, I learned how to be comfortable in my own company. For 28 years, I'd defined myself through my usefulness to others. Now, sitting alone on red rock formations watching sunrise and sunset, paint the desert in impossible colors, I was discovering who Maya was when she wasn't trying to earn love through service. On my 4th day, I met Robert, a man in his 70s who was visiting Sedona with his wife of 45 years. They were sitting at the next table during breakfast at a cafe in town, and we struck up a conversation when he complimented my hiking boots. First solo trip, he asked, and when I nodded, he smiled. Good for you. Everyone should travel alone at least once. It's the only way to really get to know yourself. His wife, Margaret, joined the conversation. Robert disappeared to Alaska for 3 weeks when we were having marriage troubles in our 30s, she said, but her tone was fond rather than accusatory. Best thing he ever did. Came back knowing exactly what he wanted from life and willing to fight for it. What did you learn in Alaska? I asked Robert. That I could survive on my own if I had to, but I didn't want to. That my marriage was worth saving, but only if we could both show up as whole people instead of trying to complete each other. He reached across the table and squeezed Margaret's hand. Sometimes you have to prove to yourself that you can leave before you can choose to stay. Their words stayed with me as I spent the afternoon exploring Sedona's art galleries, looking at paintings and sculptures created by people who'd learned to express their inner worlds through beauty. I bought a small painting of a desert sunrise, my first piece of art purchased just because it moved me, not because it matched my decor or fulfilled some practical need. That evening, I finally felt ready to have a real conversation with my family. I'd been sending brief texts every couple of days to let them know I was safe, but I'd been avoiding phone calls, afraid they'd pull me back into old patterns before I was strong enough to resist. I sat on my patio with a glass of wine, watching the stars emerge as the desert cooled around me. My phone felt heavy in my hands as I scrolled to Mom's number. She answered on the first ring. Maya? Her voice was a mixture of relief and apprehension. Thank God. Are you okay? Where exactly are you? I'm in Sedona, Mom. And I'm more than okay. I'm different. Different how? Sweetheart, we've been so worried. Dad's barely sleeping. Jake's been calling hospitals. The concern in her voice was real, and it touched something in me that had been frozen for years. They had noticed. They had cared. The price of that caring had been my complete disappearance from their lives, but it was something. I needed to figure out how to exist in this family without feeling invisible, I said. I needed to know what would happen if I wasn't always available to help and organize and fix things. There was a long silence. Then, did we really make you feel invisible? The question was asked in such a small voice that I almost backed down, almost fell into the familiar pattern of reassuring her and minimizing my own experience. But I'd spent a week learning to honor my own truth, and I wasn't ready to abandon it yet. Mom, you forgot my birthday. Again, while spending weeks planning an elaborate party for Lily. Oh, honey. Her voice broke a little. We did forget, didn't we? You've forgotten for years. Not just birthdays. Me. My thoughts. My feelings. My needs. I've been the family helper. The reliable one who shows up with supplies and cleans up afterward, but never the one who gets celebrated or prioritized or even consulted about decisions that affect me. Another silence. Longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with tears. I didn't realize. I knew you were always so capable, so independent. I thought you didn't need. I didn't think you wanted. I wanted to matter, Mom. I wanted someone in my own family to remember I exist without me having to remind them. You do matter. You matter so much. We got lazy, I think. We took you for granted because you never complained, never demanded attention like Jake did growing up. You were always so easy, so self-sufficient. Being easy doesn't mean I didn't need love and recognition. It just meant I was good at hiding how much it hurt when I didn't get it. I heard her crying softly on the other end of the line, and part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her it was okay, to fall back into the role of emotional caretaker. But Elena's words echoed in my mind. People who truly care about you don't want you to sacrifice your happiness for their convenience. What can we do? Mom asked finally. How do we fix this? I don't know if it can be fixed overnight, I said honestly. This has been going on for years. I've learned not to expect much from this family, and you've learned not to think about my needs. We'd both have to change pretty dramatically. We want to change. We want to do better. Do you? Or do you want things to go back to normal so you can stop feeling guilty? The question hung between us, harsh but necessary. I waited while she considered it. I want to do better. I want to know you better. I realized this week that I don't even know what your favorite things are anymore. Your favorite restaurant, what you do for fun, what makes you happy. I know you're reliable and helpful and organized, but I don't know who you are as a person. The admission was startling in its honesty. She was right. Somewhere along the way, I'd become a function in the family rather than a person. The organizer, the helper, the one who could be counted on to handle logistics and emotions and whatever else needed managing. I don't know who I am as a person either, I admitted. That's what I'm trying to figure out here. We talked for another hour, the longest real conversation we'd had in years. She told me about the panic they'd all felt when they couldn't reach me, how they'd realized they didn't even know my closest friends well enough to call them for information. She told me about sitting in Lily's party, watching other families celebrate and wondering when she'd stopped celebrating her own daughter. The party felt wrong without you there, she said. Lily kept asking where you were. Even she noticed you were missing. And she's 13. How was the party? I asked, genuinely curious. Successful, I suppose. Good turnout. DJ was great. Cake was delicious. But all I could think about was how we'd put more effort into planning her party than we'd put into acknowledging your birthday in the last 5 years combined. When we finally hung up, I felt drained but hopeful, not fixed. There was too much history to repair in one conversation, but hopeful that change might be possible. Over the next 3 days, I had similar conversations with Dad and Jake. Dad's call was awkward at first. He'd never been good with emotional conversations, but he surprised me with his directness. I fucked up, didn't I? He said about 20 minutes into our talk. I've been treating you like an employee instead of a daughter. Jake's conversation was the hardest. He was defensive at first, insisting that he'd always been a good brother, listing times he'd helped me move apartments or given me rides to the airport. But when I gently pointed out that those were logistical favors, not emotional support, he got quiet. I guess I thought you had everything figured out, he said finally. You always seemed so together, so independent. I didn't think you needed anything from me. I needed to be seen, I told him. I needed someone to notice when I was struggling or celebrate when I succeeded. I needed to feel like I mattered as much as everyone else in this family. By the time my last day in Arizona arrived, I felt like I'd been through some kind of chrysalis experience. Not completely transformed, that would take time, but fundamentally shifted in how I saw myself and what I was willing to accept from other people. I spent my final morning hiking alone to a spot Elena had recommended, a less popular trail that led to a stunning overlook of the Verde Valley. Sitting on a red rock ledge, looking out over miles of desert landscape, I wrote my final journal entry. March 27th, last day in Sedona. 10 days ago, I was a woman who defined herself through her usefulness to others, who accepted being forgotten and overlooked as the price of maintaining family connection. I was someone who had learned to shrink her needs so small that they became invisible, even to herself, Today, I'm sitting on a mountain in Arizona, alone but not lonely, having learned that I can take care of myself and that I deserve to be treated with the same consideration I've always shown others. My family is waiting for me to come home. They're worried, apologetic, and apparently ready to try treating me differently. I don't know if they'll be able to follow through long term, but for the first time in years, they're aware that change needs to happen. The most important thing I've learned is that I can leave if I need to. I can survive on my own, create my own adventures, make my own happiness. That knowledge changes everything, because it means I'll be choosing to stay in their lives rather than staying because I'm afraid I have no other options. I'm going home tomorrow, but I'm going home as someone different, someone who expects to be treated well and is prepared to enforce that expectation. Someone who knows the difference between helping because I want to and helping because I'm afraid of what will happen if I don't. I'm going home as someone who remembers her own worth. The flight home to Denver felt different from the flight to Arizona. Less desperate. More grounded. I wasn't running from anything anymore. I was choosing to return and see if the conversations we'd had could translate into real, sustained change. Mom and Dad met me at the airport, both looking nervous and hopeful. Mom hugged me tighter than she had in years, and Dad's embrace lasted longer than his usual quick pat on the back. "How was Arizona?" Mom asked as we walked to baggage claim. "Transformative," I said, "and beautiful. I learned how to hike and meditate and make pottery. I learned what it feels like to spend a day doing exactly what I want to do." "We'd love to hear about it," Dad said, "if you want to share." The dinner they took me to was at a nice restaurant I'd never been to, the kind of place they usually reserved for special occasions. They asked questions about my trip, my experiences, my thoughts about the desert landscape. They listened to my answers without immediately pivoting to their own stories or concerns. It felt like being treated as an interesting person, rather than just a helpful family member. "And we want to talk about your birthday," Mom said as we shared dessert. "We want to plan something special for next year. Not just next year. We want to have a belated celebration for this year, too." "I'd like that," I said. "But I need you to understand that this isn't just about birthday parties. It's about feeling valued and seen and treated like my thoughts and feelings matter." "We understand," Dad said. "Or we're trying to understand. We might need you to tell us when we're falling back into old patterns." Over the following weeks, they made an effort that was both touching and tentative. Mom started calling me to ask how my day was, not just when she needed something. Dad invited me to a baseball game, just the two of us. Jake texted me funny memes and asked about my work projects. The changes were small but consistent, and I found myself able to receive them without the old desperation I used to feel for any scrap of attention. Because I'd learned I could survive without their approval, I was free to appreciate their efforts without needing to be grateful for crumbs. 3 months after my Arizona trip, they threw me a belated birthday party. Nothing elaborate. Dinner at home with cake and a few thoughtful gifts. But Mom had marked the date on her calendar. Dad had taken time off work to be there. And Jake had made a playlist of songs he thought I'd like. As I sat at our kitchen table, surrounded by family who was actually focused on me for once, I felt something I'd been chasing my whole life. The simple joy of being celebrated by people who chose to show up for me. But the difference was that now I knew I could celebrate myself too. I'd learned to plan my own adventures, treat myself kindly, and recognize my own worth even when others forgot to. The desert had taught me that sometimes you have to disappear completely before people notice you were ever there at all. But more importantly, it had taught me that I was worth noticing, worth celebrating, worth the effort it takes to be truly present for another person. I was no longer the invisible daughter. I was Maya, complex, worthy, and finally free to take up all the space I needed to be fully myself.